What's up, Josh?
Hey, good morning, Dan.
Good morning.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. For the listeners out there, it's a big weekend for you and me because we both like golf and we're playing in a tournament together
Yeah.
as a team. Let's don't try to screw this up for us, okay, Josh? Okay,
Is that how it goes?
that's how it goes. That's my intention for this weekend is for you not to screw up our golf game. Is
Okay.
that how that works?
Uh, I would rather you focus on your own game.
Okay.
Actually, maybe the goal is not focusing on your game.
Yeah.
Maybe you should focus on my game. Maybe that would be better for your
It
game.
would be better for my game, yeah. Or I can
Eh,
focus on my parenting intention.
Yeah, or your breath, and
Yeah,
a lot of other things other
yeah,
than what particular swing you're gonna do at
yeah.
each shot.
Well, it's gonna be a fun weekend. Pretty good
Yeah.
parents. I hope you have a nice, fun weekend, week, day lined up as well. Last week, Joshua, we talked about, speaking of intentions, we talked about parenting intentions. And I
Yeah.
think we gave all of our listeners a little challenge
Yeah.
to basically ask themselves, what is their parenting intention, right? Like, what do you value? What do you want? What do you want to teach and model? Um, I halfway failed because I didn't do it right after the podcast, but then halfway through the week, I remembered it.
Mm.
And I think one of my parenting intentions is to simply be kind
Oh.
because I think sometimes I'm not very kind.
Huh.
Like I caught myself with the kids the other day, um, just needle them a little bit,
Yeah.
like that kind of shitty shaming feel.
Yeah.
It wasn't like over the top, but it was like, well, if you would have, planned your day a little bit better, you wouldn't be such an idiot, like
Yeah.
type feeling,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I was like, that wasn't very nice.
Oh, that's not
So I think
kind.
just be kind. That's going to be my new parenting intention along with, goal is to raise kids that can regulate themselves,
Yeah.
be able to model that. I loved yours that you talked about sleep well, laugh a lot, have good relationships. But that was a big breakthrough for me. Just be kind. It's not so
Yeah.
hard. So yeah,
It's crazy to think about what a big difference that would make.
yeah,
And if you had to prioritize one thing, it's, I guess it comes down to values and beliefs, but everyone likes kind people.
hmm
The world's better with kind people. Being kind to your kids is a great, like, default
yeah,
target. But we prioritize all these other things that typically matter less than kindness. So, and it's better for you. Like, you live a better day.
hmm
You enjoy things more when you're kind
yeah,
versus that needling, poking. You're feeling irritated. You're judging them, or you're judging yourself, or you're worried, and you're reacting to this sense of urgency. It's just unnecessary to be flowing through your body versus what does kindness look like right now.
right.
And it almost forces you to drop like whatever agenda you have.
hmm
Yeah, that's a good one.
Well, thank you. And pretty good parents out there. If you didn't listen to it, the last episode on parenting intention, highly recommend it because, again, like I don't think Libby and I ever sat down once throughout our parenting career and said, "Hey, this is what we truly intend." Like we just never had that conversation.
Yeah.
And it's nice. So, all right. Well, so moving on to today, right?
Yeah.
Topic is listener requested. So thank you, listeners, for this one.
Yeah. We love those.
And parenting sensitive kids.
Yes. We're gonna and a little bit more specific to boys.
hmm
And I think the reason that maybe that stands out is because um we're gonna speak stereotypically and use huge huge generalizations,
hmm
that boys aren't as sensitive as girls, men aren't as sensitive as women. Um, you know, just for the record, I would say that's like mostly true, but said maybe more specifically, if you looked at it as like men and women both have emotions, they both feel. Um, Women typically, again, stereotypically or generally speaking, I would say have veins that run deeper and broader. And so it feels like they're more emotional. Um, it's that they tend to have a bigger, broader range of emotion, where men have strong emotions evidenced by a lot of anger or excitement. If you go to a football game, like you're going to see very, very emotional men,
Yeah.
right? To say like, well, they're more emotional, less emotional. It's more the breadth and the diversity of emotion than it is do they have it or not. So it's the topic is interesting because boys generally don't have a big range of emotion, and so then when you do have a very sensitive child, it's different to parent, and they can notice the difference between themselves and their friends, or they get treated differently because, let's say, they are more apt to cry, or
Mhm.
they have a broader range, and there can be some unintentional shaming, and unintentional cornering of like their identity, like you're supposed to be versus this. And so it's an important topic to be able to address because it's actually can be a liability, but it's also a strength because they're going to have a potentially richer experience having more emotion, but it also can expose them and open them up to a lot more relational strife and conflict if they're not aware of those emotions. So sensitive children in general, um, yeah, there's a lot to say about this, I guess, too.
Well, and I would just argue that every kid is sensitive, right? It's just like what degree,
Yeah,
right? I mean, it's,
there are a few people in the world that lack emotional sensitivity.
yeah.
They're typically, whether that's a psychopath or someone that's had extreme trauma and they're locked up, or someone that's autistic or on the spectrum that just has a smaller range of emotion or it comes out differently. But otherwise, for the most part, yes, everyone has emotion. Everyone can be sensitive. Boys generally are taught to hide it, to be tough. They're encouraged to be tough. Um, Not that girls aren't, but they're more embraced and more accepted in their emotional expression, where boys generally are taught you shouldn't be feeling that way.
Mhm.
Stop crying. So I think it's important. I do want to highlight that I'm a little reactive to this like over indulging the sensitivity and like over identifying, which is like absolutely like a trend in our culture in the world right now is who am I and what's my label?
Mhm.
And like, well, I'm an emotionally sensitive person, or I'm an empath. I mean, I hear that with like whether it's clients or parents talking about their kids or talking about themselves. And I just get a little uncomfortable when anyone tries to over-identify with who they are.
Mhm.
Not that not that we're not something, but oftentimes we are more we are more what we believe we are than we are.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is we can become anything if we continue to tell ourselves we are. And so I don't like the labeling, and I don't really think it's healthy or necessary to be telling our kids, oh, you're a very emotionally sensitive, child,
Mhm.
or I'm an emotionally sensitive person, or we do not need labels, and
Right.
actually it limits our growth and our understanding, and oftentimes is a self-fulfilling prophecy because we interpret situations with that heading, with that identity, and it just reinforces, oh, see, look, of course that happens that way because I am. And I really don't like that when I work with people. I want to free them up from those constructs because they're unnecessary. Now, to
Mhm.
be informed about our tendencies, that's great. But to be limited by those tendencies is unfair. So I just wanted to say at the kind of the start,
Well, I
I,
was always afraid to read my horoscope growing up because I was like, I just got boxed in a corner today. This is who I
I will
am.
not be defined by this Chinese calendar.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But no, I mean, I mean, I guess it's maybe a personal mindset, for people, but I'm of the same mindset. I would like to constantly, like, inquire about myself and grow and not, have to think that, yeah, just be defined by a
It's
label
it's helpful to know what our tendencies
right.
are. It's not helpful to see ourselves one way in a stagnant, concrete sense.
Mhm.
Like people are learning and listening today because they believe something can change. Evidence by like, well, why limit ourselves with say I am or my kid is like, man,
Mhm.
your kid's 5,
Yeah.
your kid's 10, they're 15. They are not done. You're not done. We're not done. Understanding our tendencies is a great starting point, but to explore what's possible, I always ask clients, well, okay, you've described who you've been. Who do you want to be?
Yeah.
Because we're so like fixated on like, well, who am I and what have I been? And then a label for that.
Mhm.
But what we believe in often is like, well, who can you become or who you're working to become? And the language we use is incredibly important. So I don't really want to encourage the practice of labeling our kids an emotionally sensitive kid in a uh, not a damning way, but in a blocking kind of way,
Right.
right? To say, well, my kid is emotionally sensitive, is emotionally volatile, but I want to help them learn, adjust, and be their healthiest sense of self, even if they have a broader range or a more intense range of emotion. But instead of saying, kid, you are, like I would strongly discourage telling your children they are anything other than loved, wonderful, amazing, opportunistic, things that are out there in their future. Not that we're not highlighting things that they've done, but just be very careful of labels
Mhm.
and boxing them in, especially with something that has, in this case, I think it's more of a negative. It's a negative label more than it is positive. Like
Mhm.
I haven't heard people are like, well, hey, I'm emotionally sensitive, and
Mhm.
and that's like an admiration. It's typically like a liability. And so, parents, please, even if your kid is like, let's say, clinically diagnosed, or would you say absolutely, emotionally sensitive child, don't tell them that in
Mhm.
those words. Use words that are less labeling and less dogmatic or defining, and say tendencies,
Right.
habits. Um, you experience things this particular way, which falls on this kind of like, spectrum of normal or abnormal or often or rare. Basically, we're just trying to raise awareness so that they can make some adjustments. And there does need to be some adjustments to people that are exceptionally emotional, because their life and their relational life is more challenging because of the noise and volatility of emotion. But we don't need to give them a label like that. So that just at the onset of this, I'm really against too much identifying with like labels and diagnoses, and certainly with kids putting that label on them. Let's talk about it in a way that doesn't feel boxed in, but still feels like we're teaching them or exposing them to some of these like realities.
Mhm.
So, we typically like to do what, why, and how. The what is how to parent exceptionally emotional kids, or highly emotional children, and we're going to use probably more specific examples today for boys, because the listener has asked in particular, how would you parent and what do you do with like a highly emotional boy. The why um, is because it's uncomfortable to parent an emotionally sensitive child. Their range or their intensity of emotions can be uncomfortable to be around. It can be counter cultural if you see a boy that let's say they're out there playing in the grass, and they're playing tackle football, let's say, and they're knocking each other down and getting up, and they get all fired up. But one starts crying and cries often, let's say on the field. Okay, this isn't a right or wrong thing, but you'd say, oh, well, that's not normal. Normal meaning 7 out of the 8 boys aren't crying,
Mhm.
but one boy is crying, and not because he broke his arm, but because he just got knocked down and he felt strongly.
Mhm.
Okay. Parenting that boy is going to be different than the other 7 who got up and played the rest of the game and, never shed a tear.
Mhm.
You don't want to parent the exact same way, because it's not gonna land the same way. You want to bring awareness and all that. So we'll get to the how of that. But there's also some potential shaming risk, especially with boys. Um, and again, this girls are not immune to some of the same like pros and cons of this dynamic, but in general, because we tend to think boys are less emotional than girls, a boy that is exceptionally emotional risks being shamed by parent or coach or teacher when they are just emoting in their normal way. The shame could be, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you acting like a girl? We're going
Mhm.
to use some kind of stereotypical language, let's say on the playground or something. Not that I'm condoning it, but, people would say something like that.
Right.
Like, what does that mean? Oh, they cry more easily or they have more emotion. Okay, so you're wrong for having these feelings, is the potential absorption of that message. That's not helpful. We don't want them to think something's wrong with them. We want them to know this is who I am or this is my tendency. I tend to react this way. I don't want to, so I'm working on doing it this way. And that's part of this journey of awareness and action and alternative responses. But the why of this is the risk of shaming, the risk of them thinking poorly of themselves, internalizing this as this is a problem. What's wrong with me? Why am I so different? It's also important. Another why is uh, if this goes, let's say unaddressed, and they just kind of like bounce around through life, never understanding their higher sense of emotion or reaction, they're probably going to be very challenged in their relationships because relationships are affected by each other's energy and emotion. And if theirs is without guardrails or without understanding, it can be really difficult for the other partner to like know how to engage them and how close and how to respond and feel, the kind of the overflow of their stuff. And they're going to experience some challenging relationships. So for their future and probably present too with their current friends, but their future friends and their future partner, they're going to be better off having a better understanding of their level of reactivity to certain trigger points and experiencing certain emotions. Um, Another why that we're talking about this is they will significantly benefit from self awareness and self inflicted guardrails, that they can learn to manage their emotional like outflow or uprising in a way that doesn't have to like hurt other people or push other people away. It's not a stunting of their emotion. It's not a denial of their emotion. It's a more conscious outflow and kind of channeling of that emotion in a way that bothers people less because it just works better.
Which I feel like we're all trying to do that no matter if we're highly sensitive or not, right? I
Exactly.
mean, you
Exactly.
know?
Yeah.
So
It's not about
goes
where
for
you are on the
yeah,
spectrum of emotional
right,
sensitivity. It's a matter of what's the best way to handle this situation right now.
right.
Right. That's always the case. Like, well, I'm feeling this way. Okay. Who's there around you? And what are the risk factors or their opportunities? Is this the right setting to start yelling?
Mhm.
Is this the setting? Is this the best setting for you to start crying? Is this the best setting for you to start laughing? Now, we're not always able to calculate that, but learning that and teaching that to our children and our children learning that at early ages just makes them more and more emotionally intelligent and generally have a better, easier life because
Mhm.
they're not disrupting the environment around them as much. They're not offending people or making people uncomfortable. They're going to have more harmony in their life.
Yeah.
As do we when we say handle ourselves emotionally appropriate. And I don't say appropriate meaning what's expected of us culturally as much as what's healthy. Sometimes those are different. Sometimes they're the same. But if it's healthy and appropriate emotionally, it will go better with people around us, and we will feel we're able to be ourselves without making other people uncomfortable or pushing people away.
Mhm.
And I think most of us would want that for our kids.
Well, and I think there's a big line there between, a kid or any of us being their authentic self, right? And feeling some emotions and being like, okay, I have these emotions and how do I authentically deal with them? Versus what you said about culturally and also maybe what's just better for you in that scenario. So I just always can easily revert back to like, kids sports and youth sports and stuff. And then we especially see it on the golf course with kids,
Yeah,
which is
all
such
the
a mindful
breakdowns.
game, all the breakdowns, right? And so some kids will just, go in a hole and can't talk to anybody. Other kids are like literally yelling and screaming and
Throwing
throwing
clubs.
clubs and it's like, okay, that's not culturally cool, but it's also not good for your own like uh mental, like, regulation, and it's not good for your golf game. Like, it's not good for, like, so many things, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Versus all those it is natural, you're gonna feel like that, you know, all that sensitivity, and then maybe there's different kids handle it different ways. They're in their own authentic way,
yeah,
right? So I feel like there's a line of like,
yeah,
um, or I guess maybe I'm saying that line can get blurred, right? Between, oh, is this my authentic way of handling it,
right.
or am I crossing into this is culturally not accepted and I should stop throwing my clubs?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. There's like this gradual, like it's like a gradient of identification and authentically acknowledging who we are and how we're feeling. But ideally, it transitions into what's the most appropriate and effective expression of that. It's not a judgment of or should I not have that emotion.
Mm-hmm.
That's culturally, historically, what has happened is you shouldn't feel that way. You should feel this way. You shouldn't act that way. You should act this way. That's stunting, confusing, and inauthentic for the person. But that doesn't mean we should act out every emotion with zero consideration for how it lands or the impact of our environment. Like that also doesn't make any sense
Right.
because that does also reverberate back to us in a positive or negative way. And we want to raise awareness of this dance between awareness and expression. Like you can have a feeling that could be 100%, let's say, pure or indifferent or valid, but express it in a way that's harmful, disrespectful, confusing, disruptive. It's not saying you can't have that feeling. It's, well, how you express it matters also. You're now impacting someone else that's going to provoke an emotion in them. Be mindful of that. Like
Mm-hmm.
why share your, let's say, real intense emotion with the world if no one's asking for it
Mm-hmm.
or if it's only going to throw them off? Like it's better. It's like let's say nuclear waste the byproduct of nuclear energy, and you're like, where we put it is really important. We've already acknowledged like it's going to be a byproduct of it. We're going to have it. We're going to have emotion, but our ability to channel it into like the appropriate ways that safe containers. It's not hiding it necessarily. It's not shaming it. It's not denying it. It's this is a thing. This is not the setting for it to come out because they don't know what to do with it. They're not able to handle it. But I have a right to feel it, but I want to be able to put it over here. Maybe I deal with it later, or I deal with it this way. This is an ongoing maturation, evidenced by all the adults we know that still don't do this well. So
Mm-hmm.
like some people never get it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying this is about stunting or stomping out emotion. It's identifying it and then learning the appropriate expression or ways to release it or channel it. And that's an ongoing learning process. But for highly sensitive kids, you're not going to stop the emoting. Let me say it differently. You're not going to stop them from having emotion,
Right.
but you can help teach them different ways of expressing it in ways that are less destructive or harmful to them and to those around them, which is going to make them have a better life.
So how do we do that? We're
So,
getting into the how now.
yeah, well, I'm going to repeat a lot of the same themes that we talk about every week, and that
Mhm,
is our energy as like our greatest tool. So, we want to be a calming presence, especially around highly sensitive children, because it's like an energy force that is, you know, uh, almost like neurons, bouncing around inside in the cell. It's like a concrete room versus like a forest. If you go yell in a concrete room and it's reverberating and it's intense, like you'll feel that energy bouncing around because it can't really, can't go anywhere, can't be absorbed. Versus a forest that's like got foliage everywhere and it just like soaks up the noise. Think about like a mossy floor bottom of a forest and like big trees and bushes everywhere. It just feels like you're like being absorbed, your sound is. Imagine like as a parent, you're a sponge or you're just like this
mhm,
forest trying to like use your energy to say, you're going to be okay. You're feeling a particular way, but you're safe. This is a normal scenario in life, and I want you to be able to handle it. But you don't say that as much as you like use your energy to communicate that. Now, age appropriate, you might need to say some things or you might not say some things because the words will not, won't land well. But the first thing we want to be conscious of before we start educating and speaking is our energy. That's like in the moment kind of stuff, right? If this is
Mhm.
outside the moment, say you're driving your kids someplace or you're debriefing what happened yesterday, your energy is important, but education is going to be the most important in those topics or in those conversations because you're teaching what it's like to bring awareness to their emotional reality and that journey, this
Mhm.
emotional journey that they have. You don't want to say emotions are wrong, you shouldn't feel that way. You want to say we all have them. You had one, you had a few yesterday. Let's talk about it so we learn how that happened, what it felt like, what was the outcome of how you emoted, and then explore alternatives. That's something you can say to children at a lot of different ages. That's
Mhm.
not just a teen talk. You can have that with probably not a toddler at that great detail, but 4 or 5 year old, absolutely, to be able to explain like here's the chronological events, especially if it happened like earlier today or like a few hours ago. But we want to bring awareness through educating them about what's happening. So let's review what happened. We could do golf course. We could do, I think, what to do maybe a kid that's smaller.
Well, I actually remember, I mean, you know, our oldest son, Judd, especially when he was little, was very, I would say, like, sensitive to one, he just never left our side, like, as a baby or as a kid. I mean, you probably remember that. Like, he would
Yeah.
just cling and he just wouldn't go, anywhere. And so when you said make sure they feel safe, that really resonated because I feel like often he didn't maybe feel safe or something. And we would say, hey, can you go, like, we'd be at a restaurant, for example. And I'm like, hey, can you go over and, uh, I don't know, like, get us another menu or something? And it was just like,
You're asking him to go to Kansas.
yeah, and it was like terrifying. And that's just an example. I'm sure there's
Yeah.
like a million other examples, but he would be breathing heavy. He would be like, tightening up,
Yeah.
and you're just like, hey, bud, what is it? Like, why can't you go to,
Yeah.
And then I feel like I probably never in those situations was a calming presence. It was more like, just go get the menu, dude. Like, we're,
Absolutely. I'm
whatever.
already upset.
And it's like,
Being in your shoes, I'm already
yeah,
experiencing this pissed off feeling of like,
yeah.
the fuck is wrong with you? Go get the menu.
Yeah. It's
But
like,
if it's safety,
mm-hmm.
I totally miss it. You miss the mark. We're scolding.
Yeah.
We're shaming them for feeling this way, which is probably confusing, right?
Yeah.
If we were to hone in on what they're experiencing, they're having a hard time because somehow, for whatever reason, they feel unsafe leaving the safety of mom and dad. Okay, so what would we do to teach into that space? We would recognize it before we asked them to get the menu, and we'd say we need to start working on, let's say, Judd's sense of confidence and safety away from us,
Mhm,
and let's take baby steps. So let's try tonight at the restaurant. Let's ask him to get a menu, but not far, not out of sight,
mhm,
just far enough to where he knows mom and dad aren't right there, but we could run over there and grab him if we needed to, right?
mhm,
And he's like, I don't feel like it. And I'd say, I know you don't. Let's just try this. You see that table right there? Let's say it's 15 feet away. Okay, that's checkpoint number one. That's that you want to get to that table, turn around, and we make eye contact. And then if that feels safe, you move to the next table. And then you're only two more tables away from the hostess stand where there's the menu. So I think if we broke it up and you're talking this out like it's like this little adventure,
mhm,
if you could break it up into three segments of this thing, I'm pretty sure you can do it. So let's just get to table one, turn around, you and I make quick eye contact. And then thumbs up, you go to the next one. If you're feeling good, you go all the way.
mhm.
Okay. And just look, sit here, right here, and look, Judd, we're right there. Like I'm right here, you're right there. That's the hostess stand. We're not far. If there's any incident at all, I'm going to swoop you in 1 second.
Pretty sure he shut it all down and he never left the chair.
Well, that's that's something that I think is worth pushing in on.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's this caveat to sensitive parenting. You want to be accepting, but you want to teach them to get better.
Mhm.
In this case, more courageous, right? His life will be noticeably better with more independence.
Mhm.
I have heard so many parents say, well, but my kid just needs this. And I'm like, how do you know that? You're going off of your impression or your intuition. You have no guarantee that your child needs this. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't push them, they don't explore what independence looks like, and they're going to feel more freaked out the next time. And you're going to cater to that because he said my child's a highly sensitive child, and da 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 da. I don't buy it. I think pushing in on some of this space tactfully, kindly, strategically is better for them. They're better off in this world having a stronger sense of independence than dependence on mom and dad, right?
Mhm.
Now, did Judd figure it out in life? Yes. Like he's independent. He can go get a menu. He can do whatever. But could he have been maybe even stronger or more or sooner? Probably.
Mhm.
And this isn't like a right or wrong or you'll have to or it's doomsday thing. But for parents that feel like they have to continue to cater to their child because they're highly sensitive, um, in general, I just don't agree with that approach. I feel like it's enabling and not what's best for the child. That doesn't mean we treat them the same way we would our other child or in generality with other kids. But their kid is better off. Your child is better off with more independence than they are dependence on you. And so exploring what progress looks like in that situation is better than just accepting they can't do that. Well, Jed will never get a menu, so like we just won't do that.
Mhm.
No, no, no. Then pick another thing that's closer
Yeah.
and build up to that place because he'll feel better off in life knowing he can do something and away from mom and dad than believing he can't.
Mhm.
Right? So you got to think what's best for your child is a stronger sense of independence. And that requires creativity in your parenting. So like the hostess stand is too far, well then pick something else. Like, okay, how about you just go to that table that no one's sitting at and grab the extra, salt or whatever.
Mhm.
Or let's just, how about this? You pick a thing, I'll throw it. It might be weird and the restaurant might laugh, but I'll throw it and you go grab it. Just something that pushes him a little bit out of his comfort, that you acknowledge and celebrate and validate his effort, and then acknowledge he was safe. He did great and pushing in on that fear is better for him than caving into or giving into this belief that he's just like a highly sensitive child and he can't handle that.
Yeah.
Now, I know that's not a stereotypical example for like highly sensitive children, but the premise is still the same.
Still saying, yeah.
Push in on that tactfully, respectfully, and kindly because they will be better off having more independence and more confidence, or in other cases, more emotional regulation and believing that they can handle themselves versus just rescuing them or preventing them from finding themselves in that situation.
Right. Well, and I don't know, trying to look back, I don't know if we followed that advice or not, but, I think we somewhat stuck to it where I know we definitely had some battles where we're like, "Come on, buddy, you can do this," and there was probably lots of those throughout the years. Um, but it just like this last week, and I was thinking like it eventually paid off because we were late to the airport and, we were traveling for their golf tournament, so they have all their golf bags, all their stuff, and I'm like, Judd, you gotta go check in and get all that. And he's like, "What? I got all these bags and I go just figure it out." And I saw that hesitant, and it literally took me back to when he was
Yeah,
4 or 5, like scared to go get a menu or something. And I was like, "Sorry, dude," and he did it. And I came back and he's like, "Bags
that's
are all
awesome.
checked, they're all in." And
Yeah, buddy.
the lady said, "You're not ever allowed to do this again without a parent,
You're like,
but don't tell anybody."
oh,
So,
that's
but he
amazing.
made it all happen, and it was like a lot for he's
Yeah,
13 now, but it was kind of a lot for him to sort of manage, and that would have been something definitely out of his
yeah.
comfort zone back
Well, I
then.
know dads typically are less patient
Right.
when it comes to being, would say, tough. Or I
Yeah.
know for myself, I'm reactive to what I would say was wimpy behavior.
Hmm.
It's like a huge trigger for me. It wasn't tolerated in my home growing up. My dad wasn't a jerk, but we were absolutely like not allowed to be wimpy.
Mhm.
which I appreciate because it taught perseverance and courage and put me in situations that I would have, dodged. It was way better for me than catering to my, reservations. And so I think we're not saying disregard your kids' emotions and make them do something. We're saying be mindful of your kids' emotions, help them learn about those emotions, which we'll get to a little bit more in detail about that. But for their sake, helping them move, further out away from the safety of their space or beyond what their emotional like reactions are for their own well-being. That's what we're talking about. It's not just them behaving in a less irritating way for us. That's a
Mhm.
that's for sure a case or a bonus. But for their sake, their relational world and their overall life will be more enjoyable the less volatile their emotional world is.
Mhm.
So, going back to this list of how do we do this? Well, we start with bringing calm energy.
Mhm.
We educate them by exploring typical scenarios with them. So what happened last night? Let's review what happened last night so we can learn from that. Some emotional like outpouring or situation. You want to bring education to the table by exploring what was the trigger or the scenario. Were you tired? Did so and so hurt your feelings? Did something not go the way you wanted? And then you felt what? And you want to hover on that. Don't give them answers. Don't move past that until they're able to identify at least one, ideally, not ideally, but at least one emotion. There might be compounding emotions, but you want to help them get in touch with their own emotional self by saying, I was feeling angry. Okay, why were you feeling angry? Anger is a secondary emotion, meaning it doesn't exist on its own. It follows fear, it follows insecurity, it follows, disrespect. It is a reactive emotion to something else. And ideally, with teaching this, we get beyond just anger. Boys and men generally have a hard time identifying the contributing emotion to anger. They just say, well, no, I was fucking angry. Like, okay, but why? Because anger is not just there by itself. Something happened. Well, I don't know. I was just angry. Now we're going to keep digging here. Who said what or who did what that started this? Well, so and so said on that. Oh, and how did that make you feel? Well, pissed me off. Okay, kind of a different version of anger, right?
Mhm.
Like, did it piss you off because of like what? Like hurt your ego? Like made you feel bad? Well, yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. So your feelings were hurt. Well, yeah. All right. So there's this hurt feeling that is an uncomfortable feeling. And so you quickly jump to anger because that's a more protective, defensive state to be in than the hurt, wounded person.
Mhm.
But we identify as anger. Teaching a sensitive child that progression is getting them more emotionally informed and aware so that they can make adjustments more quickly and more appropriately. So, reviewing it and going through the chronological steps and trying to make sure you're getting like bedrock emotions, meaning for the guy who got angry, it was disrespect or hurt feelings, was the raw emotion that then quickly transitioned into a safer, more familiar one of anger, the secondary
So
emotion.
that was a huge light bulb went off when you said that anger is a secondary emotion. I feel like then if you're dealing with this highly sensitive kid and or just all of us in general, would you say the emotions that we have a hard time dealing with are secondary emotions and typical?
Yeah,
Because like it's in response to, right, like you said, someone feeling disrespected, feeling unsafe, right, feeling scared, feeling whatever, and then this is now the big emotion they have to deal with because of one of those primary
Yeah, I
ones.
don't know if they're more difficult. They're difficult in that they're not the initial emotion.
Mhm.
You're dealing with the symptoms almost of the thing.
Or I guess maybe those are the ones that we have a chance to regulate better,
The
right?
anger or
Yeah,
the first
the
one.
anger.
Yeah.
Because like you feel unsafe, you're just I feel unsafe,
Yeah.
right? Like I mean, I lived in New York City in my early 20s, was going to work at 4 in the morning once, and it was, and work. I felt unsafe,
Yeah.
It was like, heard all these noises, and I'm like, oh, I don't feel good,
Rats and
rats,
cats and
yeah, all this stuff,
homeless
and,
people.
and you're just like, so I think those primary, ones feel like it seems like like they are what they are,
Yeah.
and then it's how do you regulate? How do you deal with that secondary one? Seems to me like the big
Yeah, I think the key in regulating is the awareness of any or all of it.
yeah.
Where we struggle is when we're not aware and we just move into manifestation. The
Mhm.
emotion just manifests in us, it just expresses. There's no conscious facilitation of that. It's just coming out. It's just hit the kid, it's cry, it's throw a fit, it's throw the ball, it's run in the street at 4 a.m. because you're scared.
Mhm.
It's lacking awareness and acceptance of the emotion, and that's ultimately where there's calm, is the acceptance of, oh, I'm feeling. Oh, and do I really need to do anything about it then? But if we don't recognize how we feel, it just like moves through us, and almost like the energy itself creates like the hand who then throws the ball,
Mhm.
or the fist that like hits the kid, or the tears that come out. It's like without thinking, it just like needs its energy that has to come out. Going
Yeah.
back to the energy, like being the forest,
Mhm.
is like absorbing that energy creates a safer landing. And then we can go back and review kind of the chronological, the journey or the evolution of the event. This thing happened, seemed to hit you this way, made you feel this way, then that quickly turned into this, and then this happened. Then you got consequences, and then it made you feel like this. Like learning that whole progression is how we teach our children, whether they're highly sensitive or not, better understanding of how it's moving through them, and equipping them with like alternatives that, hopefully work out better.
Mhm.
So exploring and identifying the indicators. Like for example, if you had to go to work every morning at 4 a.m. and you're able to predict, I'm going to feel afraid again tomorrow morning, it'd be wise to come up with a strategy of what you'd want to do, instead of like shrieking through the streets of New York running. You'd want to like come up with a different plan to feel safe.
Mhm.
If you can identify scenarios with your child that's highly sensitive, and explore what are the indicators, what are the typical triggers, you're increasing awareness and understanding, which is the formula for them to be able to do it differently. Co-create strategies with them once you recognize what the typical progression can be. So if they're overwhelmed at school because the routine got changed, or they got left out on the playground from a play group, or a kid called them a name, you want to co-create with them. Let's say, that's happened before. I want to make sure you feel equipped to be able to handle that in a way that's going to work for you. Because what happened is you got upset, and you started crying or yelling, and then you got in trouble or you got made fun of, which doesn't feel good either. I would want you to have options in your pocket of that you could pull out and use, that keeps you from getting in trouble or made fun of.
Mhm.
And so then you'd say, is there a place to go? Is there a thing you can say? Is there a person you can talk to? Is there a mantra that you can recite? Is there something you can keep in your pocket that you could read? Explore a bunch of different options, as a way that makes them feel empowered, that they have an actual plan when they're feeling their strong discomfort that is typically transitioned or translated into expression that got in trouble or made people feel uncomfortable.
Mhm.
But co-creating that strategy with your kids gives them some sense of empowerment, and you're likely to tap into some alternatives that you maybe didn't think of. Is there a place in the house you can go? Is there a place at school you can go that makes you feel safe enough to kind of calm down and make sense of what's going on?
And I assume this is age appropriate, right? Like maybe the toddlers or the little ones aren't going to be able to co-create this with you
You
in
might
that
have to
scenario.
lead with some examples to see what they think of it.
Yeah.
And you could notice like they do better outside than they do inside. So
Mhm.
say, hey, one thing I've noticed is like when we go outside, you usually feel calmer. Let's put that in the toolbox,
Mhm.
so that we know when you start to feel that particular way, I'm going to say, let's go outside because I care for you. And that's a chance to kind of calm down and figure out what's going on inside of you. Now, again, if they're really small, you're going to say, I'm going to pick you up, not in an angry, controlling way, but in a rescuing, caring way. And you lay that out beforehand. You could even make it a game.
Mhm.
You could say, like, I'm going to be an aircraft. I'm going to be a helicopter. When you reach that highly sensitive level that we both have I talked about and we both identified happened last night or this morning, let's say it's a toddler. It was like an hour ago because timeliness matters with the toddler. How about what if I'm a helicopter next time and I'm like the Coast Guard helicopter and I'm going to drop a cord down and I'm going to pull you out of the ocean because I see you drowning. And I'm going to pick you up and we're going to drop and we're going to go to a safe place together. What do you think? And you want to give me a name? I'll be a Coast Guard name. You know, you can call me Huey because I'm in a big helicopter and we can give you a name, but Huey's going to come and rescue you because I want to help you feel safer. That's the toddler. You have to facilitate more of that experience, right? Than you would a 10-year-old,
Mhm.
certainly not a 15-year-old. But creatively thinking, how can I de-escalate them without just enabling them, giving them a sucker, because they're throwing a fit. Like, nope, not a good idea. They need to learn how to hear the word no. I saw this at the farmer's market this weekend, this couple, and this kid's probably like 2, maybe 3. And oh my gosh, he threw a fit and they allowed him to just like walk around like screaming and yelling. And I was saying to myself, like, this obviously sounds judgmental, but I was thinking like, nope, not going to work. You're creating a monster. And what I thought was what needs to happen is he needs to very like respectfully, lovingly, and kindly be redirected
Mhm.
because this is not working. This is unnecessary. Like he can have an emotion without it being a fit.
Mhm.
Okay. Like going back to this idea of like letting people just feel whatever. Like you feel whatever, but you don't express whatever. Like that's a different subject. So what you're expressing is inappropriate. What you're feeling is what it is. Like let's
Mhm.
figure that out. Your feelings are hurt. Normal. My feelings get hurt all the time. Let's talk about different ways to handle that. Right? Now he's let's say 2 to 3. You don't have an in-depth conversation about all of that, but you can say, "No, no, we're not doing this." And I would pick him up, I'd put him on my shoulders and make it kind of fun, but I'd basically saying, "You're not doing this shit around all these people right now. You're not
Mhm.
getting this is not going to happen."
Mhm.
And then I'd get over there and be like, "It seems like you're upset." And I say that as a teaching opportunity for him to connect the dots. What this feels like is me being upset.
Mhm.
Okay? That's the education piece. And then to say, why'd you get upset? Now we're connecting it back to the original trigger. And if he knows, then we'd say, oh, well, that makes sense. You wanted something to go this way. It went this way. You got upset. Let's talk about how you handle it, though. What did you do? Well, okay. Well, you screamed for a little bit. Okay. Is screaming okay? No. Okay, I agree. It's not appropriate. Let's talk about different ways we can handle that. And then you introduce the helicopter thing, or what if you just laid down and what if you did one push up?
Mhm.
Or what if you laid down and you pretended to be like a roly poly? Okay, going back to de escalation tactics,
Right.
right? Uh, say something weird, funny, or confusing that kind of like brings them down, and then get creative with what would a calming gesture be. And then after you do the roly poly, then we're able to talk about why you're upset and do it in a way that you don't get in trouble, and maybe we are able to solve the problem together. A little bit older, you can be more descriptive and more educational in that emotional journey, but you want to ask questions to make them think critically and find it on their own. It's more powerful. Doesn't mean you can't explain it to them, but if they can find it on their own, it's better.
Mhm.
And then explore alternative to that, let's say, normal emotional response, because you can't, uh, at the core, it doesn't work to say normal or abnormal. It just is. Um, but normal or abnormal or appropriate, inappropriate is how it's manifested or expressed. And so we want to not judge the origin or the the, the introduction of the thing, the emotion. We want to highlight that's there, and we can't always control that, but we can control how it's expressed or how we handle it, and that's where you empower them of alternatives. Going back to that emotional birth, it's important to normalize and not shame or judge the birth of the emotion. So feeling disrespected, feeling disappointed that you didn't get your way, feeling afraid, feeling insecure, normalizing those so they don't get stunted in an emotional way, and then introducing appropriate, socially or familial appropriate ways to express it with them is kind of the best model of they could be more emotional or less emotional than all the other kids. If they know how to handle it, they're going to be fine. And if they know how to handle it, they're probably going to be better off than, let's say, you know, the status quo emotional kid who's lacking self awareness and doesn't know how to handle the stuff when it surges up inside of
Right.
them. So you don't have to worry about where they are on the spectrum. You just might have to work harder at giving them tools and raising their awareness and understanding of how to handle it.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's
Another,
great.
like, the helicopter rescuing
Yeah.
them. Another thing, let's say they're a little bit older and they understand this dynamic inside of them. Uh, g- Telling them that they almost get to put a raincoat on when they're feeling insults or strong emotions, and imagining get to putting a raincoat on and all the rain just gets to fall right off their back, like this imaginary safety coat,
Magic raincoat.
magic raincoat,
Yeah.
that they don't get wet. We're not saying the emotions aren't there or the thing didn't happen. We're exploring the ways in which they respond or react that either cause more problems or less problems in their life.
Yeah. And I love how you referenced de-escalation, which was one of our first episodes. Uh, I've reverted back to that teaching about 1,000 times. Because yeah, I feel like that's a lot in
You're
all
gonna
of
have
this.
to de-escalate all the time if you have highly emotional child.
Hmm.
Uh, and again, it's not just to de-escalate them. You get them de-escalated so then you can teach them what's happening inside of them and help them explore an alternative journey. You don't need to be a therapist to be able to do this. You do have to think through what you want to accomplish, and you need to be patient. You need to probably ask more questions than teach. But it's just facilitating a learning experience for them.
Hmm.
That's all it is. Now, hopefully you find these episodes helpful and our programs helpful, because we know parents don't know how to do some of these things, and we're going to give you as many tools as possible. But it is simple questions, lower the energy, raise awareness, and help them develop plans that their emotional surges like are diverted to safe places versus unsafe places, or you know uh, um, not disruptive to others or themselves versus disruptive to others or themselves.
Yeah. This is fantastic, Josh. So let's do a quick recap
Okay.
on parenting for sensitive kids. You can hold me accountable as I was
Yeah,
taking
or
notes.
friends with sensitive golfers.
Yes, either one.
We'll get
I
a
don't
practice
know.
this
I
weekend.
don't know who that's directed at, but we don't need to worry about that, do we? Anybody? Um, so yeah, so the what, so how to parent sensitive kids, why, well, you said it can be uncomfortable. There's the risk of shaming, of risk of them internalizing, and it's better for them. They're better off if they know who they are and how they can manage their emotions, which is really all of us. Depend. It doesn't matter what spectrum we're on
Yeah,
the sensitivity spectrum. So some of the how, I love this with some of the awareness versus expression, right? Big one that jumped out to me was being a calming presence.
yeah,
This also goes back to from last episode, our intentions and my new intention of being kind. I think
yeah,
you could interchange those, be a calming presence,
yeah,
and or be kind to your kid in
yeah.
these
You almost have
these
to be calm if you're going to be kind, I feel
right.
like.
Yeah, I think they kind of go hand in hand. And I love this. You said energy is one of our greatest assets or tools, right? When we're dealing with our kids.
Be a
So
force.
I totally agree with that. Then we talked about educating and exploring the scenarios, right? So this all happened, and then what and how did you feel? And you felt what after this scenario, right? And then exploring those indicators, and then helping walking through them and co-creating some strategies with them. and then start normalizing those emotions. Like when these happens, it's normal for these emotions to happen,
Yeah.
and then they can then come up with a strategy on how that secondary emotion, how they want to deal with that, right? So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
did I do a good job with
You
my
did.
summary?
Yeah. I realized
Fantastic.
I probably left a few things out real quick.
Yeah.
There's preventative and then there's intervention.
Mm.
The preventative is everyone's already calm and we're educating and brainstorming and planning. Intervention is de-escalation. They already are in uh, the storm, and we are using our de-escalation tools to bring them down until we can teach and learn. And don't try to teach or instruct or direct when they're in the storm. You just de-escalate.
Which we talked about. Quick tip from de-escalation: you got to get them down to a 5 out of 10, at least a 5 before you can even say a word,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or they'll even hear a word.
They're too
Yeah.
reactive.
Yep.
They're in their emotion.
Yep.
So yeah, the preventative is brainstorming scenarios, normalizing and identifying their emotional responses, and then having, 2 or 3 alternative outcomes or responses when they're feeling that way.
Hmm.
That's the preventative side of things, raising awareness and game planning. The intervention is using those de-escalation tools or those safe places that they've already identified and getting energy down below a 5 before there's any kind of educational, intellectual conversation or talk.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And make sure your golf partner is at a 5 or below before
uh,
giving any advice, swing tips.
yeah, which reminds me, maybe we should game plan how our weekend goes. Where's your safe place on the course?
Is this preventative, Josh? Are we already
Yeah,
doing preventative?
yeah.
Oh, I
This is
feel
what preventive
I'm
sounds
getting
like.
triggered.
Yeah.
It's
What
like-
kind of shot are you likely to react to?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, pretty good parents. Thank you, listener, in particular, who brought us this topic of highly sensitive kids and how to parent them. So we appreciate that. As always, if you found this helpful, please share and keep the questions and comments coming in. We're happy to, yeah, discuss all of your
We'd love it.
parenting needs.
Yeah,
So, and thanks for helping be part of this community that's just trying to be pretty good.
that's right.
Yep.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Yep. We'll see you on the next one.